All right, hey, it's Rob, and yeah, I'm making a pretty bold claim in this video, but hear me out for a second. What do all these songs have in common? That's Michael Jackson's Beat It. That's Billie Jean. How about The Girl Is Mine, his duet with Paul McCartney? And even the more obscure songs like Stranger in Moscow, well, they are all songs where Michael Jackson has the sole writing credit. Nobody else is credited for composing any of those songs. I'm sure there are many more that Michael also takes just sole writing credit on. And my claim here, and I'm just making a simple statement here, I'm not trying to knock Michael Jackson. I'm not trying to say anything bad about him or saying that he was trying to, get away with anything. But basically, I'm just saying that he could not really have written a song on his own because he had no ability to play any musical instrument at all. Now, I made a companion video to this one where I spoke about Brad Buxer. He's the guy who co-wrote, basically, Stranger in Moscow with Michael, and famously never got any credit for it. His name is not on there as a composer, and he basically wrote the song sitting down with Michael in a session that took an hour and a half, and should have been credited equally. But this video I wanted to just do in more general terms about how Michael wrote songs and why I find it interesting that there are songs out there that exist where he's just listed as the sole writer. And we'll focus on Beat It today just because that's an easy song and I can do a couple things with it. But yeah, I just find it really interesting because as I mentioned in my previous video, I heard this interview with Brad Buxer, who I knew. I had worked with him on a different record after Dangerous came out. And he basically said that Michael really couldn't play anything. He couldn't play guitar, keyboards. He really had no ability to play any musical instrument beyond what any non-musical person could do, like plinking a note on a keyboard or playing drums on a table with his hands. But he really had no technical ability to play an instrument. Now I'll jump in here and say what I always say in these videos is that I did spend 2 years working in the studio where Michael Jackson recorded Dangerous. I was not an important person. I did not do anything significant at all. I sat there in the office, and when the phone rang, I picked it up. And when they needed, a lunch order, or I had to run out and, get some sound equipment or drop off some master tapes or whatever, I was that guy. My job was called studio runner, and I literally just sat around, waited for them to need something outside of the studio, and off I went to get it. Anyway, so I have been thinking about Michael and his process because I was a witness to it, and I saw how songs were written and things like that. And I just find it really interesting that in so many of these different situations where Michael just has the sole, writing credit, that so many other people needed to help him get from his basic idea, if he came up with the concept, or if he wrote the lyrics initially, or he brought in this, idea that he wanted to work on in the studio. He could not have done it alone. So basically, every song of his should have some kind of co-writing credit, and many of them don't. Let's talk about Beat It right here. Beat It's an interesting example because Beat It starts out with this part, and it basically sounds like this. Now, we all know what that is. It's played on a synthesizer, actually called a synclavier. But those chords, that chord progression, what you heard there in that intro, actually was taken from a demonstration record of that synclavier synthesizer. So not only was it just the sounds of that keyboard, but the actual chords, the actual chord progression came right off the record. And Michael thought that was really funny, which it is if you think about it. And of course, how many people are going to hear a demonstration record for a really expensive synthesizer that cost, I don't know, $50,000 or $60,000 even back then? Almost nobody. So nobody would know what it was or, be familiar with it or whatever. But that intro was written by a guy named Denny Yeager. Michael didn't write it. He didn't have anything to do with it. It was recreated in the studio by one of his keyboard players, Michael Boddicker, using that same sound. But that whole intro is basically just taken from another record. So right there, he didn't write the intro at all. he took it from something else that was already written and just plugged it in there. No, that's not the whole song. It's just the beginning of the song, but doesn't someone deserve credit for that? I mean, it's in the song. And we can go further and say, the main guitar riff, the one you hear there right at the top of the song after that part that was borrowed from a demonstration record. Of course, the main riff, which is... He didn't write that either. So it's not even like he sung that to someone and they came up with it. That was written by Steve Lukather, who's the guitar player from Toto, who played it on the record, and that's the riff he came up with. Again, that's a compositional, item right there. That's the hook of the song. And again, doesn't get any credit for that at all. He came up with that original part on his own. Michael didn't think of it or come up with it or anything like that. So again, another element in the song that Michael could not have or did not come up with, and yet he still took credit for the entire piece. Now, beyond that, Michael had a melody, and you can hear the demo of Beat It on the Thriller 40th anniversary that just came out, and he's singing the melody, and he's singing, the words, and he definitely has a concept of what kind of a song it is. It's a rock song, and it's up-tempo, and he even said, I want this to be the Black My Sharona. So he wanted it to be a really poppy, up-tempo, almost, like a power pop song, we'd call it. And so he had a concept. He definitely wrote the lyrics and the melody, but underneath it, the chords could have gone in any different direction. And I can reharmonize it right here, if I can remember the lyrics to Beat It. They told you, don't you ever come around here. Don't want to see your face, you better disappear. Fires in their eyes and their words are pretty clear, so beat it. Now that was pretty terrible, but I played a whole different chord progression under it, and basically, I didn't do such a good, job of singing it, but it works. So the, song could have gone in many different directions. It could have sounded many different ways. Somebody had to decide what those chords were, and I don't know who it was, but whoever did that probably deserved a writing credit. Again, the song was just a cappella singing and finger claps or something or other. There wasn't a lot of the song there before other people came into the studio and helped Michael out to bring it, from its basic demo form to the finished song that you hear on the record. Now, Billie Jean, he has co-writing credit on that. I believe he did sing the bass part. He sang what it was, and someone, of course, played it. So, in that kind of situation, you say, all right, well, Michael can't play the bass or didn't really, know how to play it on a keyboard, but he was able to explain enough of the idea that someone else did it. But again, does he know what the chord progression is of Billie Jean? Would he be able to come up with or whatever it is, So I don't think Michael even had that knowledge to even explain that this is a minor chord, this is a seventh chord. I don't think he even could go there. So somebody had to know these things and decide what they were and, put them underneath the, idea that Michael brought into the studio. And again, I think it just crosses the line over to, somebody else needing writing credit on these songs and not getting it. It's just, facts, as they would say today. So, again, I did a specific video about Brad Buxer, who sat down with Michael, and, in this example, Stranger in Moscow, there was no idea, no concept, no nothing. Brad started playing these chords from something else he was working on, Sonic the Hedgehog. Michael liked it, and they composed the song together. Brad absolutely should have gotten a co-writing credit. He sat face-to-face and wrote this song with Michael from, nothing. They pulled it right out of thin air. A lot of people feel like, and I can kind of relate to this too, songwriters are like a conduit. You don't even know how you do it. It just, you're an antenna and you pick up the vibe and you put it out there and whatever. But in any case, and like I said, I just did a whole video specifically about Brad Buxer. that he deserved a writing credit on there for various reasons. He didn't ask for it. He just assumed or hoped that he would get the credit, and he didn't, and he missed out on millions and millions of dollars. I mean, that song has 50 million plays on Spotify alone. So, yeah, it's just a fascinating thing to think about. You wonder, well, why didn't people ask for the credit? Why weren't people, more assertive and forthright and saying, hey, look at the work I did on this, and this deserves a credit? Well, that's what it's like when you're working with one of the biggest, if not the biggest star in the world. You've got to be careful, and you've got to walk on eggshells to some degree. And yeah, you could, stand up in front of Michael and say, hey, put your foot down and say, I absolutely believe that I deserve writing credit on this song that we just worked on because I came up with this part and that part and did this and that. And you may have been given writing credit, but you also may have been shown the door. And that would be the end of, your career writing songs with Michael Jackson. So for whatever reason, it was like, just a preference, of course, of Michael, and he wanted to be perceived as someone who could write songs and who could just sit down and come up with the idea and somehow translate that, through something musical that he was able to achieve on his own into the finished song. But the reality is he couldn't write and complete a song on his own without the help of many different people. And there are different people who have claimed different things over the years that they really deserved writing credit. Brian Loren, and there's some other people who wrote with Michael over the years, did co-writing, and really felt like they should get a credit. Sometimes they did, sometimes they did not. I know Black or White, which was written by Michael, but with Bill Bottrell, the producer. And I know Bill Bottrell came up with the, that great guitar riff. And, without that, you just don't have the song. So, interesting, situation that people found themselves in. The perception was different, 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, that you really wanted to be seen as a singer-songwriter and someone who could come up with their own songs. Today, it's very different. Today, you see 14 writers listed on a pop song, and it's no big deal, and everyone who contributes something gets a little piece of the pie or whatever, and those little pieces add up. If you, write 50 songs or whatever, and you have 1/14 of every one of them, well, it adds up like anything else does. And of course, your goal, if you are a person working with a megastar like Michael Jackson, is to get your name alongside of him. You're going to get more credibility, and you're going to get more cash in your mailbox every month because you have done something that now generates income. So I'm sure for many different reasons, people, didn't step up and were afraid to ask, or, for whatever reason on Michael's side, he felt like their contribution, what did not rise up to the level where they should have been given a writing credit. But, that situation, I mean, there maybe is nobody else who would come into the studio, not be able to even show anyone an idea on a guitar or a keyboard or whatever, and just be able to claim full writing credit when just none of it would have happened in the first place, unless people had a facility on their instrument to translate his ideas. And some of the ideas were more developed, some of them were less developed. In the case of Stranger in Moscow, which I talked about in another video, there was no idea, and they just sat down and, from scratch, brought that song to life. And for whatever various reasons, people just, decided not to push the issue and figured, well, I want to keep my relationship with Michael, on an even keel. And, I don't want to go out there and rock the boat or whatever, to keep using those metaphors. And so I'm just going to, just sweep this one under the rug and chalk it up to experience and, move on to the next one or whatever. And it did work in a lot of people's cases, like Brad Buxer, who worked with Michael over the course of 20 years. And for whatever reason, other people found themselves in the same situation. Michael was a nice guy. I don't think Michael felt like, he needed to go out and, rip people off consciously, or, he was just in denial about the fact that other people, always needed to be around him in the studio to take these ideas and take them to the next level. But for whatever reason, whether he just, omitted it, innocently and it was an oversight on his part or whatever, or, somewhere in the back of his mind, he thought, well, I'm Michael Jackson and, what are they going to do to me? Or, I don't know. It's hard to get into his psyche and figure out why this would be the case. Like I said, today, it's just more accepted that multiple songwriters work on songs, and he probably would have gone along with that too. But back then, he would take a writing credit, the sole writing credit on a song, even though so many other people helped him out, and just move on and go to the next one. All right, that's what I got for you today. I think I pretty much covered this to death. And thanks for watching. Love to hear your comments as always. And, I tend to go in and out of this Michael Jackson content, but if I'm on a roll with it, I'll usually do a few more videos. So who knows what I'll think of next. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.